Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen yalalai 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, יללי, 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 la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Shavua tov Shavua tov Shavua tov Shavua tov Shavua tov Shavua tov Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu hagiladi, Bimera veyamenu, Yahavo eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu hagiladi. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hagiladi, Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu hagiladi, bimheira yavu leinu, Mashiach ben David, bimheira yavu leinu,
Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Agiladi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Agiladi. B'mchira yavu elenu, Mashiach ben David, b'mchira yavu elenu. Mashiach ben David,
Shavua Tov! Shavua Tov! So we're going to get our candles ready. So if you are planning on lighting your menorah with us, we invite you to light your shamish and then bring it back so we can all see your shamish. And then our guest star, Rachel Barenbaum and Adam, will lead us in the blessings over the Chanukah.
Hello. Oh, and it looks like I got some kids now. That was amazing. That was so much fun. Can you take your mask off and sing with me? Guys, we're gonna... Guys, come on. Is this for this? Uh-huh. Oh. Ready? Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavotenu, bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh.
Happy Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, Chag Hanukkah Sameach.
We're gonna light, and then Moshe will sing Ma'ot Tzor and maybe another Hanukkah song for us.
You guys are early. Oh yeah.
Yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la.
Ma'osu Yeshuati, Bechana Eleshabeach, Tikun Beit Tefilati, V'sham toda nezabeach, V'etachin matbeach, Mitzaram nabeach, Azegmor v'shim izmor, Chanukah tamizbeach, Azegmor v'shim izmor, Chanukah tamizbeach.
Do you have another favorite? Do you want to add?
Sure. We did this at the Nigun Circle.
Awesome.
Goes like this. It's from the sort of little statement you say right after lighting candles. הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים על הנפלאות וגם על הניסים. הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים על הנפלאות וגם על הניסים שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים על הנפלאות וגם על הניסים. הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים על הנפלאות וגם על הניסים שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
Beautiful, thank you. So I want to take a moment to introduce my old friend Rachel Barenbaum, who, as I said at the very beginning, as people were coming in from the waiting room, Rachel and I had the opportunity to study at Pardes together after college, and her husband Adam was there, and Rick was there as well during that year. It was a really fabulous year of learning, and I was so excited to see that Rachel had a book that came out, her very first novel, just this last year, just a year ago. It was rated, I'm gonna mess up my introduction of you, Rachel. Let's see if I can do this well. Hold on a minute. Boston Globe bestseller, a New York Times summer reading list selection, a summer of 2019, Barnes & Noble Discover Great New Writers selection, etc., etc. Very, very well acclaimed novel, A Bend in the Stars, and she has a new book that's coming out soon, which I hope that she will speak with us a little bit about. She's a prolific writer and a reviewer at the LA Review of Books and DeadDarlings. She's a graduate of GrubStreet's novel Incubator and also of Harvard University. Really, it's so wonderful to have you here tonight. I have such sweet memories of being at Pardes with you and of learning with you, and more than anything, of standing in that area where we used to eat lunch and chatting with you. I have like very distinct memories of talking with you and talking with you, Adam, in that area as we were sort of thinking about our lives and our futures and the future of the Jewish people and being in Israel and just sort of taking it all in and figuring out how we were going to utilize this and make the meaning out of this in our own personal lives. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. Wow. We also talk about that year all the time, and in fact, loved our time so much in Israel that we brought our whole family back and went for a sabbatical and were there for a year ago. We love it. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. Yes, Bend in the Stars is my debut novel. My first published novel. I've written several that are in the desk drawer, will never see the light of day, but this one finally made it, and more coming now, so woo! But what I want to talk about tonight with the Festival of Lights, of course, is the theme of light, A Bend in the Stars, which is basically what draws a line through the whole narrative. And it's a metaphor that follows throughout, and why that is such an important metaphor for me personally. So some of you who are here tonight, thank you. Some of my family's here, yay, have heard me tell this story a bunch, but I just love to share it because especially now I love to think about my great aunts who used to come to dinner almost every Friday night for Shabbat. And they would pull me over. I was the oldest, and they would bend down. My grandmother passed away when I was very young, so these were her sisters, and they would bend down and they would say, Rachel, Rachel, you know, and I'd have to go over to them in the corner, and they're, you know, like eating herring, drinking Manischewitz, right? And I'm terrified of them. I love them. They're very scary. And they say in a very serious voice, they say, Rachel, do you know where the passports are? Do you know where the emergency money is? And I nod, right? Because of course I do. I know this question is always coming. And then they say, we had to leave Russia. We might have to leave America. You need to be ready. And I would look at them terrified, right? Because I'm thinking about this question all the time. And I said, how will I know when it's time to go? When do we leave? And they said, you'll know. And I would say, like, how, right? I'm a 10-year-old. How do I know when I'm supposed to leave? And they said, you'll know. You know good, you know bad. And that is, those two messages have stuck with me always. These big questions of when do we run? And also, how do you know? How do you know it's time to go? How do you know good from bad, good from evil? And this book, A Bend in the Stars, is set in 1914 Russia. And it's the story of a Jewish scientist who's racing Einstein to prove relativity. He's just on the verge, Einstein is just on the verge of proving relativity. He needs actual physical evidence. And he's put his theory out there. There are a whole bunch of expeditions that are racing to Russia to get to this eclipse, to get this photograph, to beat Einstein. And so I invented a scientist who's in this race. He endangers the family, war breaks out, World War I, right? And all the Jews are conscripted, they're being sent to the front line. It's a dangerous time, the family thinks they need to leave. But Vanya, the scientist in my book, says, no, science is more important, give me 3 more months. He goes missing. His sister Miri chases after him. She's the protagonist, she saves the day, she's the hero. She falls in love along the way. There's history, there's science, there's adventure, but all along is this question, right? This quest for relativity. So how does this all tie back into light? Well, you're looking for the bend in the stars, right? Einstein is studying light as a way of coming up with ways to synchronize clocks. That's what he was working on at the time that he really came to his theory of relativity. And he came to the idea of light as the one constant in the universe that you can use. But in order to see light, there's this big question, do you have to have darkness, right? Can you only see light if there is its opposite? Similarly, does good only exist if there's evil? So do we only know when it's time to go because we know it's time to stay? Do we only know what's scary because we know what's not scary? So these are some really big questions. And people ask me all the time, well, you know, you're not a scientist. Why do you write about relativity? And the answer is, well, Einstein was first and foremost really a philosopher. And he thought about light and these ideas from these questions. What is light? How do we define it? Does it need an opposite in order to be defined? And yes, he came up with these, you know, he translated his ideas into brilliant math and brilliant equations, but at its core, he starts with thought exercises. And what he's most famous for are these thought exercises. And you see all kinds of illustrations in science classes at all levels of Einstein's famous thought experiments. And I love that because I think he makes it very accessible. And I think that's his true genius, is that it's not about understanding the equations and the math. That's the translation of his idea, which at the core comes down to questions like, what is light? Why is light important? Why does it matter? Or as I talk a lot about in this book too, A Bend in the Stars, what is time? So I took a philosophy class at Harvard and the professor walked in and she says, what is time, right? And I'm thinking minutes, hours, seconds. And she says, no, time is a convention. We invented it, right? Just so we could all agree to be here and start Havdalah at 8 o'clock tonight. Well, 8 o'clock in where I am, 6 o'clock where you are, right? But that's totally invented. The moon doesn't care that it's time for Havdalah, right? Or anywhere else what the time is. We just invented this convention. And so time, I really emphasize in this book by using the Jewish calendar to mark chapters and the passage of time. I refer to the Russian calendar, which is different, of course, than the Jewish calendar, and the American calendar, which is again different because time is made up. So there are all different ways to track it. So I guess what I want to leave you tonight is we really are in the Festival of Lights with our beautiful menorahs, right, all around us, is these questions of how do you know what's good and how do you know what's bad? How do you know the dark from the light? Can they exist without one another? And there are a lot of ways to answer that, right? No matter what age you are, no matter where you are in the world. And I think maybe that's a great question that I'm going to leave you with to think about and talk about over your dinner tables tomorrow or later tonight as you move into dessert. So thank you for having me.
Wow, thank you so much. I am very much inspired to read your book. And actually, I spoke to two folks, Aviva Perlman and David Endorsky, before this event, and they both said they read through your book and that it's amazing. So that's a great sell from the Denver Jewish community. So do we have questions? Daniel, do you have questions? You're on mute. You should just know if you.
We've got one so far that came in actually at 3:30 today with no context. So I thought it was asking me this question and it didn't apply to me. So I was like, what? But question for Rachel. Tell us about your next book and when we might be able to read it.
Oh, this is like an author's favorite question. Thank
Bit
you.
of a doozy.
Yeah, so I know, yes. So the next book is called Atomic Anna, and it will publish in February of 22. So the publishing timeline is extremely long. I actually sold it over a year ago as a full draft, and I've been editing it with my editor at Grand Central, Hachette, this whole time, the whole draft, right? So we go through and big picture questions. So this book, Atomic Anna, is about 3 generations of women from the Soviet Union to America, and they work together to build a time machine that they use to stop Chernobyl and save their family. So,
wow. I'm looking at Jeff and thinking that's your type of book. So I have a question for you. I usually ask this at the end, but we'll see if there are any other questions between me and this, or between me and the end. When you think back to your childhood self, what did you think you'd be doing as an adult? Did you think you'd be a writer? Did you always want to be a writer? And what would you tell to people on this Zoom who might be still thinking about and dreaming about what they could be when they grow up, whether they're kids or adults?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I really wanted to be a writer and a novelist. That has just always been my dream. And I've been writing books, a lot of really bad ones, maybe some good ones still. Thank you. But when I graduated from college, I had a lot of loans, a lot of debt, especially after our year in Israel. And I had to go to work. I had to get a real job in business. Writing does not pay well, especially when you're a new writer. The best advice that I give to people is you just have to keep writing every day. You have to wake up and you have to write, even if it's really, really terrible writing. And so actually I have a funny story that I love to tell that I think people like to hear, is that when I showed up at Harvard Business School, when the very first week that you're there, you have to take all these tests, these aptitude tests or whatever, and the career services office is going to tell you what you should be doing, if you should be like in stocks or a consultant or whatever. And one of the first questions was, tell us what you see yourself doing in 10 years from now or 15. Are you on the trading floor with stocks? Are you on a boardroom? Are you, I don't know, helping fund wells or something, right? Like all these issues. And then the very, very bottom, the question, or do you envision yourself as a novelist? And so I check off novelist at the very bottom, right? This is my first week at Harvard Business School. And the career services office calls me in and I have this meeting and they're like, so no one ever checks that box. Like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I really want to be a novelist. I just can't afford to be one because it turns out writers don't get paid that well. They were like, yeah, so let's talk about your options. So, sort of went through that, but still that night, I went home and I was like, let me just finish this chapter. So just keep writing. And I think you will find the story that will, help bring you out to the world, and you've got to keep going. I interviewed another author who said her best advice was basically the writers who end up getting published are the ones who persist the most, right? They believe and they just are, you get so many rejections and they keep going. So keep going.
That's great. That's like great advice for anybody in life, right? Like there's rejection in life and keep going, just keep plugging along.
Yeah, you get a lot of no's. I actually interviewed Guy Raz also, and he, famous NPR personality. And I was like, well, how do you know the entrepreneurs? Like, what's the secret between all of them that succeed? And he said, basically, it's the ones who don't care when they hear no. They hear no thousands of times, and they don't care. They just move on. And that's the difference. And I've always loved that kernel. I've carried that with me ever since.
That's great. It's really great. Daniel, do you have other questions?
None so far have come in from the chat, but I actually have a question for you, if you don't mind, which is earlier you mentioned that you have a bunch of manuscripts that are just kind of sitting and possibly, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but possibly gathering dust as well. And I'm just curious, what was it about A Bend in the Stars that felt so much like the diamond in the rough for you? What like drove you to choose this one over the others?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it was more, so I was managing a hedge fund, and I just sort of sat there, like I looked in the mirror and I said, what are you doing? Do you want to be doing this 10 years from now? Do you want to be talking about stocks, or do you actually want to have a book published? I'd gotten like 300 rejections at that point, like for my other books. And I think I just said, to make this happen, I just have to go all in. So I applied to this program at GrubStreet, and then I shut down my business. I had another small business. I just shut it all down, and I said, I'm taking this huge leap. And Adam was with me, so we took the leap, and just said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it a year and see if I hit, if I hit a big milestone in a year, I'm going to keep, maybe I'll give it another year. And at the end of the first year, I got my agent. And so then I said, I'm going to give it one more year. And then at the end of that year, the agent sold my book, A Bend in the Stars. Woo! And then I said, all right, I'm going to give it, let's see if I can sell one more. And then we went to Israel for that year, and I wrote Atomic Anna while we were there, and it sold. So I'm in it again. I'm going to keep going.
Little fun fact, when Rachel and Adam lived in Israel, they lived in a house in Ra'anana. Guess who lives in the house in Ra'anana that they lived in now? Julie Geller. It's the house. I've known 3 families that have lived in that house. I love it.
It's a great house. It's an amazing neighborhood.
So there is one other question that's in the chat right now that I see. Apparently people, I don't know if you see it, Daniel, but I can see it. So how did you choose your preferred genre?
So, I've written a bunch of different kinds of books. And I think that my Aunt Linda is on here with Steve, I think, and they've read all of them. Thank you. Across many genres, but this one seemed to stick. I guess because of the personal connection because I had family that ran from Russia, and I love that time period, and I love reading historical fiction. So I don't know, it just came together. It could also be that I had just written enough beforehand that I had learned how to write a better book, right? I had enough failure in the past that I sort of learned what was working and what wasn't, so.
Best teacher.
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've got a bunch actually that just came through.
Okay, great. Let's have a couple more, and then we'll turn it over to David to do a few more songs.
This is a great one. How do you know when you're done with the story or the novel that you're writing? Always a good question.
This is so hard. So people had told me this because you have this question. So you're done when you think that you have written the absolute best novel that you could ever write in your life, right? You're like, I have written this so well at this point. And so, usually that means you write a whole draft, you put it down for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, you come back, you go through it again, you put it down, you get a couple of people to read it, they tell you what stinks, you go back to it, right? So it takes a few years. You're never done after you write one draft. And so you go through that, you go through that, you go through that, and then you say, there is no way I could write a better book at this point in time, at this point, right? And if that is when you send it off for an agent. Like if you have any doubt, you're like, yeah, maybe if I had another week, I could make this paragraph better, whatever, it's not done, right? You have to just know in your head, there's nothing else you could do without somebody else reading it and helping you along. And then you're done.
That's awesome. And how empowering too, I feel like, to feel like you've just like made that thing happen. That's awesome.
Yeah, but it does, I mean, you have to be really honest with yourself, right? And really like, yeah, I can't write this. This is, I gave it everything I had.
Yeah. Dang. Awesome. Cool. A couple more that just came through. This is kind of a good two-parter, so because one is probably easy to answer. Do you write by hand or computer? And how did you get an agent? All from the same person.
Yeah, so definitely on the computer, not by hand. And
I've seen her handwriting.
yeah, you don't want to see me writing, and yeah. And I don't use any of the programs. There's like Scrivener, some people use to help you keep track of your chapters and your outlines and things. I just use good old Microsoft Word and usually a spreadsheet to keep track of characters and timelines, because I kind of come from the spreadsheet world, so spreadsheets work for me. Yeah. And what was the second one? Oh yeah, how did I get an agent? Thanks. So again, I got to the point, where I wrote the best draft I could. I did a year at GrubStreet and their novel Incubator program. So a lot of other drafts. And then at the end of that, I went to a conference in Boston that GrubStreet runs. It's called The Muse in the Marketplace. And they have a lot of agents there, and I scheduled a lot of meetings with agents. And as it turned out, I was early for one of my meetings, because you always show up early to meet with an agent, right? Well, anybody you should, but especially something like professional like that. And I was at a table next to another woman who was also early for her meeting. And it turned out that she was an agent. And so she looked at me and she said, "Oh, so what's your book about?" And so I got my elevator pitch, right? Which I also practiced for months, my elevator pitch. This book is set in 1914 Russia. It's the story of a scientist racing Einstein to prove relativity. That's what I said. She's like, "Oh, here's my card." And then she ended up being my agent because her meeting came, but I called her. So again, once you're ready for an agent, you've got to get that elevator pitch, just polished, just down. And that's how I found her.
It sounds like kind of scary, kind of intimidating, and kind of exciting all at once, as the best things are, right? I think we have one more question.
Great.
All right, we're gonna just end on this one. I think this is a nice one. What are you reading now, and who inspires you as a writer?
Oh, okay. So I just finished the Book of V by Anna Solomon, and it is so good. I don't know if you guys have read it. It is a twist on the story of Purim, Esther, Vashti. It's amazing. I really, really recommend it. I love it. Alice Hoffman, my Salinger year, Joanna Rakoff, also I think is coming out as a movie soon. Amazing. Rachel Kadish. Basically, I love Jewish women novelists. And so a huge shout out to them. Anna Solomon, the Book of V. You should check it out.
Thank
Awesome.
you so much. Rachel, thank you for being here. Adam, thank you for being here. It's really awesome to see you guys after so many years. And to sort of meet your kids too. Mine are here. You can't really see them.
And
Manila's coming to say hi. Hello. And Nadine too. They're mine.
Hello.
It's amazing after so many years how you can reconnect on Zoom in this way. And this idea sort of brought up for me this, lighting with the stars. Who are the stars? And people who do interesting things in the world. And so what's so exciting about our program is that we have, Rachel tonight, we have the Attorney General tomorrow, the governor is coming on Monday. On Tuesday night, we have a beautiful singer, Sephardic Ladino singer who is actually in Israel, I think maybe that next year. Sarah Silverman, was she there the year after? Do you know Sarah?
So we are friends with her, but I don't
know. So Sarah, and then the following night, a woman named Morgan Simon, who actually has, she works through economics to be an influencer for social justice, to help people invest, people who have significant amounts of money and companies invest in the good and the right. And so there's actually a Newsweek article about her just before Shabbat, because she's being sued because she convinced companies not to invest in private prisons that were imprisoning immigrants. And she wrote and was just very honest about separation of families and the injustices that were happening in our country, are still happening in our country. And so she's being sued, but this article, just came out. So she's really out there and doing a lot of the social justice work that our community has been really focused on and committed to over these last years. So, and then the final night we'll have an astronaut, which will also be exciting. Somebody totally different, a Jew who went to space. So thank you so much.